U.S. has announced a formal blockade of Iranian ports and coastal areas. This is illegal action. All vessels are advised to immediately return to port if leaving and discontinue transit to Iran if that is your next port of call.
The U.S. and Iran have hit pause on fighting, but the conflict is far from over. There's no agreement, tensions are still high, and a naval blockade is now at the center of what happens next. This is part 3 of our series, where we're breaking down what it all means and how it affects you. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, go check those out on our channel. They explain how we got to this point. Now, if you're wondering what this blockade means or why it matters to you, you're not alone. This isn't just about ships or military strategy, it's about gas prices, groceries, jobs, and the overall economy. A naval blockade means the U.S. Navy is controlling who can move in and out of certain waters. Right now, that focus is on Iranian ports, not the entire Strait of Hormuz, but ships going to and from Iran. The goal is to cut off Iran's oil exports and pressure them into a deal.
We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen.
That matters because the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. About 20% of the world's oil supply moves through it every day, and when that flow is disrupted, the effects spread quickly across the global economy. In the first 48 hours, CENTCOM said that no vessel made it past U.S. forces, with 9 vessels turning around after direction from the U.S. Navy. But this war is doing more than just pushing up gas prices. We've already seen global supply chains disrupted, which means it's harder and more expensive to move goods around the world. That can lead to delays in shipping, higher costs for businesses, and eventually higher prices for consumers. It's also impacting food prices. The Middle East is a major supplier of fertilizer, and disruptions in shipping have already affected those supplies. A new survey released by the American Farm Bureau Federation shows 70% of farmers say that fertilizer is too expensive due to rising costs caused by the U.S.-Israeli conflict in Iran. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins told reporters that the Trump administration is trying to look for ways to help farmers, but the majority of farmers are not affected by the conflict.
Well, everything is on the table right now. Clearly I think we're at 36 days for the conflict, has elevated the issue of fertilizer and how important it is for American farmers and frankly for our food supply. Food security is national security. Now, the good news is that about 80% of our farmers actually last fall locked in their fertilizer. So as we're moving into planting season, it's only about 20 to 25% of our farmers that didn't lock that in. We are working directly to ensure that we can get them what they need and it won't bankrupt them. The president waived the Jones Act. We opened up a line, I believe, from Venezuela. We have more announcements coming soon. The short term is really important that that kind of 20% of farmers that were keeping the fertilizer prices in the realm of the possible for them, especially in a tough farm economy. The long term of this, though, should sort of shine a light for every American. This is why the president's America First agenda and onshoring, whether it's manufacturing, now fertilizer, why that's so important. America is doing better than almost every other country on fertilizer because of our energy independence agenda. We have a big LNG here. LNG costs have actually come down since the beginning of the conflict, but we've got to build the infrastructure in this country, more infrastructure. We've got some, but more, where we can take that LNG, turn it into the nitrogen that the farmers need for the long-term sustainability and the protection of our own country, where we can feed ourselves and not rely on other countries.
The aviation industry is feeling it too. With airspace restrictions and higher fuel costs, flights are becoming more expensive and less predictable. And then there's the broader economic impact. Global organizations warn the war is slowing economic growth, increasing inflation, and putting pressure on governments and businesses worldwide. A new report from the International Monetary Fund warns that the disruptions in the oil market could lead to the higher possibility of a global recession. So even if fighting is happening thousands of miles away, the effects are showing up in everyday life. The first place most Americans notice it is at the gas pump. When oil supply tightens, prices go up.
I think that's going to be up to how the negotiations go. President Trump said this morning that he thinks we're nearing the end. The U.S. kept their side on the ceasefire. We've stopped firing. The Straits of Hormuz have not been completely reopened, so we will see. And I'm optimistic that during the summer we will see gas with a 3 in front of it sooner rather than later.
Right now, the situation is complicated. There's a ceasefire in place, but it's fragile. There's no formal deal, and the U.S. is still enforcing a blockade on Iranian ports, and Iran still has influence over the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, diplomacy is still happening. Pakistan, acting as mediator, is pushing both sides back toward negotiations after Vice President J.D. Vance announced last weekend that after 21 hours of negotiations, the U.S. and Iran could not reach a deal.
We've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms. We just could not get to a situation where the Iranians were willing to accept our terms. I think that we were quite flexible, we were quite accommodating. The president told us, you need to come here in good faith and make your best effort to get a deal. We did that, and unfortunately, we weren't able to make any headway.
Trump told the New York Post that talks could resume soon.
I will never set timelines on behalf of the President of the United States, but with respect to the blockade, as you know, it has been fully implemented, and it's being enforced against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports. I want to make that point clear. I've seen some misreporting on that as well. This includes all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And our U.S. forces in the region are supporting the freedom of navigation for vessels that are transiting the strait to and from non-Iranian ports. So I know some in the press were confused about that. We are supporting the freedom of navigation, just not with respect to any tanker or vessel that would benefit the economy of Iran as these negotiations continue.
So we're in this in-between moment, not full war, but not full peace either. The U.S. is still trying to force Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, agree to limits on its nuclear program, and move toward a broader deal. On the other hand, Iran is raising new issues in talks with the United States, including reparations for war damage. At the same time, the rest of the world is still trying to figure out what to do next. The United Kingdom and France are hosting a major summit in Paris, bringing together more than 40 countries to address the Strait of Hormuz crisis. The goal is to find a way to safely reopen the strait and get global shipping moving again. Leaders say the closure is, quote, deeply damaging to global trade and is already driving up the cost of living worldwide.
The Strait of Hormuz is a choke point for oil and gas getting to the international market. That's pushed the price up. That's being reflected in every household, because whilst the ceasefire between the US, Israel and Iran is undeniably welcome, it is also highly fragile. The region remains on edge, and a lot of work is required to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, to de-escalate the situation, leading to a sustainable ceasefire.
But if this drags on, the risks will grow. We could see higher inflation, tighter supply chains, and more strain on global markets. In extreme scenarios, analysts warn that it could even slow economic growth or trigger broader instability. This isn't just a regional issue. Europe depends heavily on energy from this region. Asia depends even more. And while the US produces more of its own energy, it's still tied to global pricing and trade. So when something like this happens, it doesn't just stay overseas. It shows up in your bills, your grocery store, and your everyday costs. The bottom line is this: the naval blockade is both a military strategy and an economic pressure point. It's meant to force negotiations, but it also creates ripple effects that reach far beyond the battlefield. Right now, everything is paused, but what happens next, whether talks succeed or fall apart, will determine if things stabilize or get more expensive. The National News Desk will continue to follow the developments as the U.S. conflict in Iran continues.